Hello, and welcome to Consciousness Coaching Level 1. This class is on cosmology and mythology. Cosmology is a term that describes or discusses the origins of the universe. When we talk about cosmology in our program, we will oftentimes talk about the universal structure and how it's created, but really what we're talking about is the universe in the psyche and how that was created. And mythology is a really good way to explain what's happening. So we use mythology, we use archetypes to tie in the cosmology of the particular client or the particular system. Every system has a cosmology and a mythology. So the rock band Genesis had an album, and it was "And Then There Were Three." And today we're going to talk about the three big players in our psyche. So a little bit about mythology. Uranus is the sky god. He is like Father Sky. He was castrated by his son, Saturn. Saturn represents limitations. Uranus represents chaos. So chaos is structured or limited and put into the bodily form. All of us come from this. We're Uranus in the sense that we come from the universal consciousness or the sky or the heavens. We're castrated at the moment of conception with our body. What happens is that Saturn was prophesied to be dethroned. He ran the group of the gods named the Titans. The Titans represented our animal nature, our low-level consciousness, very brute strength. And this was going to be dethroned by Jupiter, which rules the Olympians, more of the refined gods, the ones that we idealize or view as perfect. So in our psyche, there is a struggle between liberty, chaos, freedom, the universal consciousness, and the fact that we're limited or castrated by a body, thought, emotion, and low-level consciousness. So that's one way how we play that out. And then our Titan nature or animal nature being dethroned by our God and divine nature. And our chaos and our structure have to coexist because we can't be unlimited and we need limits and structure. And our animal nature, yes, needs to be balanced with more of the divine Jupiter or Olympian nature. So we've got a lot of mythology going on here. When Jupiter dethrones his father Saturn, he gets together with Neptune and Pluto and says, we're going to divide the world. Jupiter will get the largest piece, which is the heavens. Neptune will get the waters or the oceans, and Pluto will get the underworld. This is how our psyche is divided. So let me just take you back to the moment of conception. We're just going to use your father. Not everybody has the mistress or the unintegrated parent as their father. This is just for the metaphor of conception. Your father perpetrates or penetrates your mother. Your mother suffers, is tired, has to go through the contractions and childbirth pains, and she becomes the victim. And you are the product of that penetration and that victim in terms of the pregnancy, and you become the savior. It was all worth it because you were the product. So in our psyche, there is a penetrator or a perpetrator. This is going to be a crack in the snow globe. This is going to be something that shatters the perfect vagina, metaphorically, the perfect virginal concept, if you think of the virgin story. Again, these are all metaphors. Your mother is the victim, but you were all worth it, and your psyche set up as the savior. In this model, we identify that we meet our parents' needs and we love our parents, not the other way around. When you're working with a client and you're going through the personal TED Talk, it is to remind them that they are choosing to stay in victim. They are choosing to stay meeting their parents' needs and loving their parents through their impure thought, their emotion, and their desire, because they were set up as the savior of the system. You are born to meet your parents' needs. So therefore, we can't ever eliminate conflict and chaos because we're trying to hold our rightful place in the psyche which is this aspect of the savior. At the base of the triangle, you and that one parent that you have the wrong alliance with, and we will go deeper into this in level 2, you have an intact system. There is a secret. It's a wrong alliance. You view each other as similar. The outcast parent becomes the shadow, the unintegrated parent, the mistress, or the perpetrator. So everyone that comes into your life in that person, place, thing, or situation that you don't like, most of them, not everyone, but most of them, is going to represent that parent that is on the tip of the triangle. You do not have the alliance with them. Therefore, they're kind of outcast, like Pluto was put to the underworld. And you're like, nope, I'm nothing like them. But the purpose of the TED Talk is to repeatedly show you how you need to integrate that outcast parent. You need to honor the story in child and victim so that you could keep your savior complex sort of afloat. And this creates keeping you in child or victim. So the TED Talk satisfies to show you all 3 aspects of your psyche. The point of the program is not to make you never a victim or always a perpetrator. It's to identify 20% of the time you can stay in this psyche setup, but 80% of the time, so 8 out of 10 times, the conflict is so little that it honors the victim and savior setup of the psyche with you and your parent. And yet you still have enough energy to perpetrate the world, which is to move forward. This is how we use our fire appropriately. So Neptune was given the oceans, Jupiter was given the heavens, and Pluto was given the underworld. At the moment of conception, Pluto is the one that first arrives, being the perpetrator. And again, we're just using the penis and the penetration as symbolic. This can happen if you're in the petri dish. This does not have to be physical act of sex. The moment that the penetrator, the perpetrator, or the crack in the snow globe shows up in your psyche, you're brought back to the moment of conception. At the moment of conception, you were given impure thoughts. No matter how beautiful and how in love your parents were, there was a penetration or a sin, let's say, of lust, of greed, of gluttony, of jealousy. Something was present in these 2 people. Let's just stick with the metaphor of penetration and sex and assume that it's a lust. So that lust is a deadly sin. Pluto's realm is the underworld or Hades, or that what became the Christian devil. It is your impure thoughts that keep you keeping yourself in the underworld. You throw yourself into the underworld every time you have an impure thought that was simply inherited at conception. So it is the moment of conception when you're castrated and put into this earthly body, or the beginning of the development of the body, that the first question of the personal TED Talk refers to. Is the conflict representative of mother or father? You start to identify that there's one thought bucket, one thought bad bucket that you most bring in as your conflict. Why? Because that's the one you need to integrate. That's the one on the outside of the triangle. That's the one that you consider to be the perpetrator between you and that wrong alliance parent. You and the wrong alliance parent keep each other in victim savior. So you don't want that snow globe to be perpetrated. So we need conflict and chaos. We need problems to enter our sphere of consciousness so we can identify that that person, place, thing, or situation is exactly what we need to integrate into our psyche, thereby seeing in step 2, what don't I like about it? The judgment is what you simply have in yourself, and you can go find in that particular parent from step 1's bad bucket. Again, eventually you're going to start seeing mother and father being the answer to the first question, because ultimately we know that vibration is vibration, and mom and dad had the same vibration, even though one lived out one side of the coin as a 0 and the other lived out 100. But the beginning steps with a client, we get very clear that most of the conflict is going to come from that parent that they judge the bad buckets more harshly, that they view as the shadow or the unintegrated parents. I want to specify something here. You do not need to know the parent with the wrong alliance to have a wrong alliance. It could be a parent that died. It could be a parent that abandoned you. You could have been adopted. This is in the psyche where you make that alliance. This has nothing to do in reality with the story. So for instance, my wrong alliance parent is my father. And my mother is the unintegrated parent that I need to integrate. 90% of my conflicts come up as my mother being the parent that it represents. My mother was my best friend. I was at the mall with her every day. I talked to her for hours on the phone. Do not get caught up in the earthly story of the client or your own life to identify the wrong alliance. The wrong alliance parent, and I'll just give you sort of a nudge here, but we'll cover this in level 2, has to do with something called a power currency. You have the same power currency as the wrong alliance parent. There is overt power and covert power. You either tend to be more direct or you tend to be more manipulative. We'll go deeper into that later. So next is Neptune got the oceans. So at conception, you got your thoughts, and at pregnancy, which represents the oceans, the waters that you were born, with the amniotic fluid, is the emotions during pregnancy. This is where you got that second layer of your subconscious. And then the third layer was when you're actually birthed. Now you're given a body. The body is the heaven. The body is where we have pleasures. The body is where we have pain. So if your pain is pleasure or pleasure is pain, you're going to live that out in the body as your desires. And in astrology, Jupiter was a whore. Jupiter loves sugar and sweets. And so you start to see that Jupiter archetype is linked to these desires of the flesh, even though he's the god of Olympus, because this is happening in your head. Pluto was in exile. He was the god of the underworld. We put ourselves in exile. We don't move forward in the world as we should, let's say, because we have these impure thoughts and we don't want anyone to find out. And we love to attach to the emotions and be sad or lonely and drown ourselves in emotions. And it leads us back to a fake consciousness, thinking that it's universal consciousness. This is what I call toxic waters, and we'll see that later. So which God do you co-create with? We each have a preferred God we co-create with. If you tend to lean towards more manipulation, envy, lust, and sex in terms of your archetype or in terms of your deadly sins or vices, it's probably Pluto. If you tend to be more about victim, depression, sentimentality, delusion, innocence, sloth, wrath, it's Neptune. And if it's more along the lines of gluttony, greed, and excess, even scarcity being the other side of gluttony and greed and excess, is Jupiter. So these start to show us the vibration at which we create with. We always co-create with a God that is the main God in our psyche or our subconscious. The universe is simply responding to what we co-create with. It is not doing anything. This is not magic of manifestation. It is responding to a low-level vibration, and any one of these is low level. It is our working in the world and moving from teen adult to spiritual adult that we actually start to shift the vibrations around these gods and the psyche. So here is the bigger picture, if you will. So the desire is usually why belief change doesn't happen and why behavior change doesn't work. So this is on the right side of the pie. So the D is linked to the desire. It's linked to the body. And when people change, what they do is they stop biting their nails. They don't eat the cake. They stop having, casual sex. They go on a diet. They save money. There is something in the earthly realm, and we see this in the law of octaves, the square. We absolutely have to do something in the earthly realm. But that isn't enough to change belief. That isn't enough to change consciousness. And so most people are constantly here removing something out of the body, adding it, the gym workout, the organic foods, or removing the alcohol and the drugs. This isn't enough. If you actually see, the thought and the emotion are a bigger piece of the pie. They are 2/3 of the pie. If you do not increase the vibration around the thought and process the emotion into what I call a feeling, you can never change the belief. Removing the diet, removing the job, removing the boyfriend, removing the clothes, removing whatever the behavior is not enough. That is simply behavior change. It has a place. But in order to transmute, in order to grow, to raise consciousness up the octave, you have to address the thought and the emotion attached to the body, attached to the desire. Before the body, you got the thought, you got the emotion, and the low level consciousness. This program addresses in every single conflict all three. So, why behavior change doesn't matter? Obviously, there is an importance in changing a behavior. The more you do a new behavior, the more likely you are to eventually transmute. So again, you can eliminate the man, the job, the cake. It's not enough. It's only 1/3 of the entire pie. You must process the thought and the emotion attached to why you want that desire or that behavior in order to clearly move forward in your life and to raise vibration from the moment of conception. Every single time that a client has a conflict on a scale of 1 to 10, you must do the TED Talk. Why do we process thought, emotion, and desire? This is a clear distinction why meditation doesn't work. In meditation, if you simply observe the thought passing by, as is often told, then you never process the thought fully. Every thought has an emotion. Every thought and emotion has a desire in the body. They're a package deal. And the bow is the low level consciousness. When you process any conflict, you will process the thought, emotion, and desire. Thoughts and emotions are bricks in your body. If you do not process them over time, that brick, energetically speaking, will turn into a tumor, into arthritis, into a migraine, into some illness. So, one of the things that you're going to see in this program is with every conflict on a scale of 1 to 10, once we identify the thought is mom or dad and their bucket, the judgment that we have around it and what it proves or what need it fulfills, we have taken that brick and we have literally turned it into sand. We know in physics that something that is a low density, something that is small, like a sand particle, is easier to move. It can go further. It's the same thing with our psyche. If we're trying to move a brick, the desire, without looking at the thought and emotion attached and processing it, how hard will it be to move in the world? It's going to be much harder. So, one of the things we accomplish with simply the TED Talk, the child script, is going through taking that brick, thought, emotion, and desire, and literally converting it into particles of sand. They're easier to move and clean up. So this in itself will start to show dramatic change in a client's life. It's simply awareness, but I have hung up with clients and within 5 minutes, they're getting the text they want. The issue has been cleared up. This is physics. We've processed it fully. The other reason this is super important, I started this entire model because I got cancer and I had a tumor, and then that tumor became 2 tumors. That tumor is the brick that I never processed, attached to the thought and the emotion, linked to the desire, in my case, of wanting more time with my children. So when I started breaking down the brick into thought, emotion linked to the desire, I started to get healthier. So one of the things you'll notice with clients is within 24 to 48 hours, they will get a physical symptom, a migraine, they'll break a toenail, they'll vomit. Because as you process the thought, emotion, and desire, it has to be felt fully through the body. And the body, being the vehicle of the earthly element, must develop some rash or sickness, but it's very minor compared to getting cancer. So, this is what we're trying to eliminate. Removing the desire is not enough. You will always seek a pedestal parent or a new and shiny thing that will save you. Remember that this relationship, let me take you to this slide, at the bottom of the triangle is you being the savior to your mother being the victim. Again, the parent on the tip of the triangle and the one down here is the wrong line. It does not have to be mother at the base and dad at the top. This is the natural order, but that is not the case in the real world. But let's just assume that you're the savior to your mother. And that relationship, you're going to want to constantly create, leaving this other parent out. If you simply attach the desire and be the only thing that you change is the desire, you still keep this victim, which is you, and the desire becomes the new pedestal or the new savior. The victim savior archetype never goes away. Our job is to always bring in the perpetrator so that we can shift our consciousness. So I often say we have a creation problem. So I'm going to start here at the air. Any creation cosmology, any system of philosophy or spirituality is going to talk about creation. There are 5 elements in creation. This never, ever changes. It's reflected in the way that the world is created in any cosmology. It is linked to the mind, it is linked to the body, it is linked to the universe, it is linked to nature, it's linked to everything. It's also linked to the planes of the universe and our chakra system. So here we have the first chakra, the second chakra, the third chakra, the fourth chakra, and then the fifth chakra. The 6th and 7th chakras are all of the elements combined. So this ether element is the Akashic plane. I've said before, we as humans only have access to the Akashic as the highest plane. This demonstrates why. We come from the Akashic plane. We, through the law of correspondence, get to find out what's going on in the Buddhic plane and the monadic plane above. But we only have access to the Akashic plane as dense as we are. At conception, we get our air, our thought. At pregnancy, we get our water, our emotion. And at birth, we get our body, our desires. We are only in control of the fire. The fire goes 0 to 100. If we're very restricted in childhood, let's say you have authoritative parents, and you might use very little fire and have a lot of fear. If you have permissive parents, they may have never said anything. You were destructive and you can burn the house down and you use your fire to destroy. Every single human being has the potential to be fearful and courageous. Fearlessness is just as dangerous as fear. We want to find a way to balance our fire just right. This is why we create conflict, which takes me back over here to the ether. Conflict and chaos is an attempt, like I said before, to go back beyond conception. I don't want to be conceived. I want to be next to my father. If you have Christian upbringing, or you want to be back on the throne next to your father or the universal consciousness. So you create conflict as an opportunity to use your fire. If the conflict number is way too high, an 8, 9, or 10, you're going to have very little fire to create. You're probably very fearful. If your conflict number is small, then you're going to have more fire to create with, and this is courageous. Having no limits on your fire is dangerous. This is why the TED Talk works. What we're going to try to do is get the client to, if they start out with us 8, 9, or 10 conflict, to slowly reduce to a 2, a 3, a 4. That way, they're still maintaining some level of fear. Fear is important. Negative thoughts and impure thoughts and low level consciousness is important. We live in the earthly world and we have to show up as the titans that we have programmed. And then with the rest of the fire, we can own our throne, own our kingdom, come to create in the world. And as the fire is the only element of transmutation, transmute the impure thoughts, emotions, and low level consciousness in the body to higher vibrating thoughts, emotions, and desires. So we have a creation problem. If we try to remove only the desire, time, money, resources, sex, food, freedom, and we never address any of these other elements, we have a problem. That's why behavior change doesn't work. One of the things in the coaching calls that you're going to see that I'm going to recommend you do with clients is ask them in one sentence to give you the conflict. This is the conflict statement that's going to be here. The conflict number tells you how much fire they have tied up in the impurity of their thoughts. If it's an 8, they're judging themselves very harshly. They don't trust their fire, and they're only going to have 2 in their fire to move forward and create. Okay, it's a small step, but at least they can move forward. At a 10, there is absolutely no fire. It's so caught up in the thought of their impurity, of their low level consciousness, of their low vibration, that they're so afraid to move forward, as if they don't deserve to create anything. What we hope to eventually get is conflict that's created at a 2 or a 3. So they have 8 to move forward and own their throne and create their kingdom and move forward with their will and their purpose. We still need a 2 or a 3 conflict. If not, we would burn the house down. This would be fearlessness, not okay. Many years ago, first time I ever went skiing, I was a teenager. My sister and her husband took me skiing, and we were on the blue slope. I had never gone skiing. I shouldn't have been on that slope. And there was a video camera, and it took a picture, and it was going to give you an assessment. And the video camera, when they gave back the assessment, said, "Get off the slope. You have no fearlessness. No, you have no regard for safety." I was so reckless as a teenager would be that I never thought there was a danger in going on a blue slope where I had never even been on a bunny slope. So the TED Talk and the creation of conflict and problems reminds us that we were castrated for a reason. We cannot have unlimited potential, unlimited fire. And we're surely not all universal consciousness, because if not, we would have never incarnated. And it reminds us that we're human. So let me just sort of give you a teaser here. When a client does the TED Talk, when they process fully down to the earth element, one of the things that they're going to tend to do is have something of a sacrifice or an offering. We're going to learn about this in level 3. When we fully process the TED Talk, the thought, emotion, and desire, we have to show up somewhere in the earthly element to sort of pay up, if you will. We tend to pay up with time, money, and resources, because this is the currency of self-worth. It could be sex, it could be health or illness, it could be food, drugs, or alcohol. We'll cover more of that in level 3. So this is a question that I ask clients oftentimes. If there was a piece of pie, of pizza, and there were 3 big slices, how many would you eat? And 99% of clients would say 1. I want all 3, but I would only eat 1, because if not, I judge that I'm a glutton. Well, we want all 3. The problem is that most people, for social optics, will only eat the 1 slice over here. The desire, changing the job, changing the bank account, changing the gym, changing the friends, changing the external world. It doesn't work. You must address the thought and the emotion attached to the desire, the external, in order to have full belief change and transmutation. Thank you.